Get ready to take a flamethrower to the official narrative and learn what the elites don't want you to know. You're listening to The Tom Woods Show.
Hey everybody, Tom Woods here. It is episode 2635 of The Tom Woods Show, and I've got Marty Bent here with us, oddly for the first time. I mean, can you believe we let 2,634 episodes go by and no Marty Bent? And I didn't get nearly enough complaints about that, but now finally, here we are. Marty is founder of TFTC, managing partner at 1031, has a great many things to say about a great many topics, but I have a lot of Bitcoin-related questions to throw at him. So Marty, welcome to the show.
Tom, thank you for having me. As I said, it's an incredible honor to be here. Been a fan for years.
Oh, that's very kind of you to say. As I was just telling you, I just got out of the shower. So I was racing up here. I had everything go wrong today simultaneously, but doggone it, we were going to record this thing. Now, I sometimes look at people's Twitter feeds before I talk to them. And one of your posts said simply, "We're going to win." And I want to start there. Who is we? And what does victory look like for Marty Bent?
We has many contexts, but I think broadly speaking, it's liberty-minded individuals who are worried about the prospect of this overarching state, surveillance state, tightly controlled, centralized system winning out, which we were trending towards pretty aggressively. But I think post-COVID, particularly in the last 2 years, I think the signal and the light is beginning to shine at the end of the tunnel that liberty has the potential to win in the long run. And I believe we're going to win. I think we can be described as anybody that's actually taking agency over their own life to go build the tools that will facilitate that win in the long run, to put it succinctly.
Well, as I say, even though I want to talk a lot of Bitcoin things, I can't help mentioning when you bring up COVID, that the very fact that we now have as the National Institutes of Health director, a man who was one of the best known, most prominent lockdown critics, is an outcome I could not have guessed at or even hoped for back in 2020 and 2021. That would have seemed like out of science fiction. That's not possible. You know, try to keep your expectations low, because that's certainly not going to happen. And yet here we are living in a world in which it did happen. So even though I get very discouraged from time to time, maybe I'm the sort of person who drives you crazy because I feel so discouraged a lot of the time. But on the other hand, I also want to be the person who reminds people, you know, we did accomplish this, and this. Like even during the thick of COVID, I did remind people they wanted to impose this quote unquote vaccine passport system all over the place. They managed to institute it in a handful of cities, and it didn't last very long even there, because there were just too many of us, refuseniks, for that thing to work. And we do need to be reminded when we feel like the boot is constantly on our necks and it seems like the obstacles are insurmountable, that we have surmounted obstacles before, and we shouldn't give in to despair. So I'm glad I have a kindred spirit in that.
And I think I'm guilty of it myself on my show, is feeding into the doomerism, or the black pill, as many people like to call it. And I think over the last few years, particularly as I have a growing family of 2 young boys and a third child on the way, I think that mindset just isn't productive if you're looking at your children and thinking about the future that they're going to live in. You can wallow in the squalor of the black pill, or you can decide, you know what, I'm going to go out and do things to make the world a better place for them. And I think a lot of people collectively have been doing that in recent years.
Maybe it might be better to say I'm gray-pilled. You know, maybe gray-pilled is a thing where you see the areas of optimism, but you need to be motivated to keep working. And one of the things that can motivate you is realizing that the forces of evil are still out there, and how many obstacles are yet to be overcome. So maybe I'm gray-pilled, and that might be the best place to be right now. So I want to ask you about something that is a common feature in a lot of Bitcoin circles, and even in your, as I said, I was looking through your Twitter account, and that is Bitcoin versus quote unquote crypto. And there are a lot of people, we might call them Bitcoin maximalists, who say Bitcoin is the one true coin and the rest are blankety blank coins. And I want to get into that a little bit, because I want to know, now obviously if you were to, I could come up with some coins and say, the reason these are blankety blank coins, I don't want Johnny learning new words in the car when his mother's listening to the Tom Woods show. That's why I say that. But if there's a coin that you could produce an infinite number of them tomorrow, then obviously that's a worthless coin. That I understand. But I have some friends who say to me, I agree with you. The vast majority of these coins are not worth anything, but I'll make an exception for Monero, because Monero is a good cryptocurrency because in part it has more privacy protection than Bitcoin has. Do you have any particular feelings about Monero and how we ought to think about it?
I think all of these coins, I guess I would be labeled a Bitcoin maxi. And I think what it comes down to is, at the end of the day, a lot of the broader crypto industry has really misunderstood what the competition is. They think it's a tech competition for better tech features on these blockchains, but really it's a monetary competition that comes down to these coins competing on monetary properties. And I think objectively, Bitcoin has the best monetary properties. And I think the Monero community would put the argument forward that if you don't have inherent privacy on chain, you have a deficient monetary property there. And I would just push back and say, I don't think that is the case. Monero is making the trade-off of you get perfect privacy, but it's hard to audit how many coins are actually in circulation. And when it comes to that aspect, I think the most important thing that Bitcoin solves is bringing sound money back to the world. And when it comes to enabling privacy at the protocol level or layers above it, I think that is a feature that is being added slowly but surely over time. And so while I think it's objective to say that Bitcoin out of the box is not as privacy preserving as Monero, it is certainly out of the box a better monetary protocol, but has a better monetary policy, if you will. And I think slowly but surely we're beginning to see over time, both with people using Bitcoin at the protocol layer smarter and development kits coming to market, like PayJoin development kit, making it easier to use Bitcoin privately out of the box, and privacy features being added in layers on top of Bitcoin are going to enable Bitcoin to be used privately over time. But at the end of the day, whether it's Monero or any other cryptocurrency, I think what's really misguided people is they think these things compete on tech features, so privacy being one. But really, they compete on monetary properties, and Bitcoin has the best monetary properties objectively, in my mind.
So Bitcoin, we all know, has this 21 million maximum. Now, is it, and I can explain this to the layman in the audience, because although I'm sure I have a lot of very, very knowledgeable people, I also have a lot of beginners on topics like this. Is it like metaphysically impossible that the number of Bitcoin could ever exceed 21 million, or is it simply highly, highly unlikely?
The latter, highly, highly unlikely. For the 21 million limit to be lifted and for somebody to add tail inflation to the protocol, you would need everybody leveraging the protocol to agree that we're going to lift the 21 million cap. And I think the incentives are such where that's just untenable in the long run.
Hey everybody, it's Old Woods here to de-bamboozle you. We've been brainwashed into believing the only way to grow our money for retirement is to risk it in the stock market. Not true. You can reach your financial goals and dreams without taking any unnecessary risks. Bank on Yourself is the proven retirement plan alternative that lets you bypass Wall Street, beat the banks at their own game, and take control of your financial future. What does that look like? Well, guaranteed predictable growth and retirement income with no luck, skill, or guesswork required. Your plan doesn't go backward when the markets tumble. Both your principal and growth are locked in. Tax-free retirement income. You'll know what your tax rate will be in retirement. 0 under current tax law, which protects you from the coming tax tsunami. And you're in control. You get access to your money for any purpose with no questions asked and no government penalties or restrictions on how much income you can take or when you can take it. Can't do that with a 401k or IRA. You can get a free report with all the details on how the Bank on Yourself strategy adds guarantees, predictability, and control to your financial plan. Just go to bankonyourself.com/woods. That's bankonyourself.com/woods. How about a Bitcoin critic who comes along and says, Bitcoin originally sounded like something great and revolutionary, but what in practice has it really accomplished? I mean, if it's this alternative to fiat, or it's going to give you more security in your purchasing power than fiat currency will give, that's one thing, and maybe it is like a digital gold. But if I can barely spend it, or it's never, even with the Lightning Network, it's never going to have the capacity to substitute for fiat money in terms of day-to-day spending. Well, yes, it's true. Fiat does a lousy job facilitating the preservation of your purchasing power. We concede that. But it does facilitate spending. I can get a cup of coffee with a few dollars that it would be very hard for me to get with Bitcoin. So what if people say Bitcoin overpromised? And in reality, we get what we get is a bunch of tech nerds telling us Bitcoin solves this or that problem, when, it's okay, but it's not the revolutionary thing we thought it would be. It's obviously not a replacement for the dollar. So what has it accomplished? What would you say to a skeptic like that?
I would reframe it and say that Bitcoin has succeeded on those properties wildly and even exceeded expectations. I think the problem is that people haven't adopted Bitcoin and are asking to receive it as payment. And so while skeptics will throw out that trope and make it seem like it's a problem, a Bitcoin problem, it's really an individual problem. And I think we're still very early into the monetization phase of Bitcoin. And so you have this two-sided market problem where there's very few people that actually have Bitcoin, and even less people that are willing to accept it as payment if you're a merchant. But the technical capabilities of the protocol and the layers being built above it can facilitate these payments if need be. And over time, we're seeing more and more companies begin to accept Bitcoin as payment. And I think one thing we've learned throughout waves of merchant adoption memes that have been going on since 2013 is how to position Bitcoin. And so I think tools like Zapright, which is an invoicing software that allows you to send invoices as a business that pair Bitcoin alongside fiat payments, are a good step in the right direction, in the sense that you can, as a merchant, signal preference to get paid in Bitcoin as opposed to fiat. And the way they do that is they enable you to put a premium on a fiat payment compared to Bitcoin. So if you're accepting dollars over Stripe or Bitcoin over the Lightning Network, you can say, hey, I'm going to charge you 5% more for Stripe because that payment's going to cost me 5% because of the fees that Stripe takes. Or you can send me Bitcoin over the Lightning Network for no fee because it's cheap and fast and has instant settlement. So when it comes to Bitcoin actually being able to facilitate these payments at scale, it can do that today. It's just a matter of people coming to the realization that they should want to accumulate Bitcoin as a business or as an individual, and actually implementing that in practice. And I think if we're being objective, we have a long way to go before the market is saturated with individuals who are thinking that way, because people are still stuck in the mindset of the dollar system and how they accept payments for their businesses.
I'm interested in the work you do at 1031, so we're going to get into that in a minute. But building into that, I asked this once on Twitter, and I got some pretty good responses. But like I noted recently, I thought it was interesting. Maybe I won't mention the name. I don't want to affect the stock price, but the CEO of a Bitcoin mining company that I kind of like follows me on Twitter. And I thought, well, that's kind of reassuring. I take that as a proxy for the person being a good guy. But suppose I'm a Bitcoin mining company, and over time, Bitcoin mining becomes successively more difficult, more expensive, absorbs more energy. How does a Bitcoin mining company remain profitable over time when it knows that its primary activity is destined to become ever more costly?
Yeah, it's Bitcoin mining. As somebody who started a Bitcoin mining company, sits on the board of a Bitcoin mining company now, it's the most ruthlessly competitive market in the world. Anybody can buy a computer that runs the SHA-256 hashing algorithm, Hashcash SHA-256, plug it in, and you're competing globally with anybody who has access to electricity. And these computers. So I think over time, what we're going to see is that the most successful miners do a couple of things. Number one, get their all-in electricity cost as low as possible, and that will manifest by miners going out and finding stranded or wasted electricity. We're already beginning to see that with flare mitigation, people using natural gas that would otherwise be wasted to mine Bitcoin with it. We're seeing sort of this arbitrage on grid systems where miners will go and find utilities that have substations with excess capacity that's being underutilized, and they'll broker a deal with that utility to buy up that excess capacity at below market rates. And then on top of that, participating in demand response. So I think in the long run, the miners that will be most successful will drive down their all-in electricity costs, find energy that's being wasted or stranded energy that has no other use case or no other market that it could actually sell to. And then on top of that, adding additional revenue streams. So I mentioned demand response. We're beginning to see that. We're not even beginning. It's pretty mature down here in Texas with ERCOT miners basically engage in these demand response programs that allow them to lock in a lower power purchase agreement and then also sell that electricity back to the grid during periods of peak demand. And then beyond that, I imagine miners will get into financial services and other sort of areas to add to their revenue suite. But I think all having the idea in mind that this is a competition, as hash rates going up, difficulties going up, the profitability of each individual miner is basically at the whims of the freest market that has ever existed. So you have to make sure you're being as efficient as possible. Excuse me. And I believe adding additional revenue streams will become more common among mining companies moving forward.
Hey everybody, let's take a minute to thank our sponsor, Persist SEO. If you're getting buried by your competition online, then build your brand, your reputation, and your lead flow with digital marketing by Persist SEO. If you're a small local business trying to compete against large companies in the service industry, then increase your visibility with Persist SEO. What if you have low or no leads coming in on a consistent basis? Well, then website search engine and conversion optimization can help move the needle to a more prosperous business model for you. Are you tired of cold calling and networking? Use your website as a lead generation engine. What if you're not showing up for your services in the search engines? Well, get found with Persist SEO Expert Search Engine Optimization. All you have to do is call 770-580-3736 or visit them at ineedseo.help for a free website audit and consultation. That's 770-580-3736 or ineedseo.help. All right, well, that all makes sense to me. So what does it mean to be, quote, the world's leading Bitcoin technology investor, as it says at 1031.vc?
It means we've allocated the most amount of capital in private markets in the Bitcoin focused economy. So 1031, we're basically an investment platform looking to invest in the infrastructure that will lead us to a Bitcoin standard. So that includes investing in companies that are building out infrastructure for miners, exchanges, financial services firms, hardware wallets, and other types of security for Bitcoin. And I think to date, it's essentially investing in the early stage of the build out of Bitcoin infrastructure. So we believe that there's going to be an order of operations to Bitcoin's long-term success. So to date, since 2020, we've allocated around $150 million and really focusing on that front order of operations. So making sure it's easy for people to buy and sell Bitcoin, to secure that Bitcoin, easy for energy companies with excess energy to buy equipment, to plug in, to mine Bitcoin. And we like to think of ourselves as a leader in terms of seeing where the market's going and putting capital behind themes that we think are going to manifest in the medium term to support the adoption of Bitcoin. Because core to our thesis is that if you believe that Bitcoin is the superior monetary asset, you must also believe that that monetary asset is going to need infrastructure to run on and to play within. And so we're sort of doing the picks and shovels play of investing in that infrastructure. And we think by building that infrastructure, it will actually make Bitcoin more valuable over time because people will be able to do more things with it.
What initially got you into this whole world?
I was a young portfolio analyst at a managed futures fund. I was also a child of the great financial crisis. I was a senior in high school in the fall of 2008 and happened to be taking an elective economics course in high school. Went to an all-guys prep school, and our teacher was very on top of what was going on. And he said, "Gentlemen, what's going on right now with these bailouts and all this money printing is not good. You should try to understand it." And so I took his advice to heart, went to study economics in college at DePaul University, wound up getting a job at this fund as an analyst. We index commodity trading advisors. A lot of the market, or one of the markets that we trade, were FX markets. And so part of my job was following central bank announcements and trying to write commentaries explaining why markets move based off of the policies that the Fed and other central banks were deploying at that period of time. And I remember vividly in like early 2014, when Janet Yellen had taken over the helm of the Federal Reserve, that markets moved very positively after her comments. And I did some research to figure out why they were reacting so positively. And one of the top sort of responses from analysts was like, "Oh, she was wearing a purple pantsuit. That's a very regal color. She's feeling strong. She's feeling in a position of strength."
Isn't this crazy?
Yeah, as a 21, 22-year-old analyst, I was like, this doesn't make sense to me. And right around that time, the Silk Road and Mt. Gox were big headlines in the news. And so I got introduced to Bitcoin that way and sort of dove headfirst into understanding what Bitcoin is and what Bitcoin represents and how it operates, juxtaposed to Janet Yellen wearing a purple pantsuit, really appealed to me. I was like, this makes much more sense to me personally compared to what's going on over here. So I decided to do deep research into Bitcoin and ultimately dedicate my life to making sure that it succeeds.
Yeah, isn't it crazy? So your goal, in effect, is to try to bring about the existence of a world in which the color of the pantsuit worn by the Fed chair won't really matter.
Yeah, exactly. You should have to worry about.
It's absolutely wild, the world we live in. So, you also. What I want you to do is try to explain, or maybe use an analogy to explain to people the difference between owning Bitcoin, let's say, via an exchange, and actually owning, like having a hardware wallet or something like that. Because everybody I deal with in Bitcoin, they don't want your money. They say you should not have your Bitcoin on in a place like with a place like Coinbase, and Coinbase specifically is very often singled out. What is it about having your Bitcoin on an exchange that's so bad, and what specifically is it about Coinbase that makes it worth singling out?
So Bitcoin is a peer-to-peer cash system, and I think that cash, what it really refers to is Bitcoin is this digital bearer instrument.
All right, so let's go back for a minute. Peer-to-peer gets used all the time. Can you just explain in normal people language what peer-to-peer means? Who are the peers?
So the peers are individuals running the Bitcoin software on hardware that they control, their computers. Okay. The individuals could be companies, countries now at this point, but anybody running that software is basically saying, here's the rules of Bitcoin. And not only are they running the software, they're keeping a copy of the ledger on their computer as well. And so you have,
and the ledger is
the blockchain, the basically the system that that amends the ledger of Bitcoin anytime a transaction, anytime a block is mined. The ledger basically says, here's who owns what Bitcoin and what wallet. And so the holding it, if it's a bearer instrument, means you can possess it. And the way you do that is you spin up a wallet. It's a private public key pair. Your private key is essentially your password. Your public key is the address that anybody can see on the ledger, where the Bitcoin can sit. And to move the Bitcoin from that address, you need your private key to sign. And if you actually hold your Bitcoin that way, where you have a private public key pair, Bitcoin's in the public key, you have the private key that can move it, you have full control over your Bitcoin. And that is a supremely better position to be in than holding it with an exchange. When you hold Bitcoin with an exchange, they have Bitcoin in a public address and they control the private key. And so you're opening yourself up to third-party risk there, whether that's they're simply taking your Bitcoin, saying that they're keeping it for you, but they're actually giving it to traders to trade to try to produce a yield. It can be more benign than that. They can hold Bitcoin on your behalf, but the government can come to them and say, hey, you're not allowed to send this Bitcoin to this individual because we don't like them. We saw this with the Canadian truckers rally in 2021. And so I think the idea is if you actually hold your Bitcoin, you're eliminating that third-party risk. If you hold it on an exchange, you're stomaching that risk. And there is a spectrum of comfortability with handling private public key pairs for individuals. And so if you do have to hold it with an exchange, you probably want to find a reputable one. And people do not like Coinbase, I think, because they are extremely confused, number one, and that confusion has led them to service this broader crypto economy, which is becoming more evident by the day that it's not really a crypto economy. It's more of a casino, a gambling mechanism. And I believe, I'll just speak personally, that by doing that, by trying to service this broader crypto economy, Coinbase is spreading the resources thin and really dropping the ball when it comes to providing goods and services around Bitcoin specifically. And I think taking the risk of doing that from a business perspective is something that doesn't make me comfortable. So if you have to hold your Bitcoin on an exchange because you're not comfortable securing a private public key pair, my advice is to find an exchange that's focused solely on Bitcoin. So companies like Strike, River, Unchained are a few that I recommend because they're Bitcoiners. They focus only on Bitcoin and they're building exchanges that make it so if you're holding Bitcoin with them, they're going to make it clear we're Bitcoin only. We're only focused on securing and enhancing your experience with our exchange as it pertains to Bitcoin. And typically, these exchanges have been more transparent throughout time.
How would you, if you had to give a traditional A through F grade to the current administration with regard to Bitcoin, what would you give it?
I'd give it an A. I mean,
really?
For the longest time during the Biden administration, at least, and even during Trump 1, there was a bunch of uncertainty in terms of what people could build. And the regulatory risk was significantly higher. And I think since Trump's taking office for the second time, I want to say re-election, but there was an administration between the first and the second. But Trump 2, the regulatory environment has completely changed where many people in the industry feel very comfortable building and feel like there's more clarity in a sense of what we're allowed to do. And I know there are a bunch of people who are out there saying, we need the strategic reserve. We need to be buying Bitcoin at the federal level as aggressively as possible. I think that's a nice to have. I think the best thing to have is this regulatory clarity or this airspace through which we can build the infrastructure necessary to get Bitcoin into the hands of individuals and businesses around the country and ultimately around the world. And that's all the Trump administration needs to do, in my mind, is just give us the room and the certainty that if we build businesses and build products around Bitcoin, the threat of getting thrown in jail does not exist anymore. And under Biden, that was significantly high. And I think the private market can build out the infrastructure without the government needing to go and buy 1 million Bitcoin.
I guess I would say I want one more thing, which is I want this crazy capital gains thing taken away with Bitcoin, because technically, if people are going to comply with it, it makes all Bitcoin transactions, it adds a layer of complication to them that if it didn't exist would make adoption marginally easier.
It certainly would. I think all taxes.
Sure. Right. But this one in particular.
Yeah. But even if you run the numbers on the capital gains stuff, like if you have to pay a capital gains tax on Bitcoin, it means you're in a better position than you were when you initially bought the Bitcoin. And on that note too, if you are using exchanges and even software that plugs into wallets, is getting to the point where you can just plug and play. Like the tax thing's an afterthought, but it is annoying to have to think about. But I would say to anybody who is sitting on the sidelines looking in, be like, I'm not going to get into Bitcoin because of the capital gains, because the friction that's introduced with capital gains. It's like, it's not as bad as it was in, say, like 2014 when you were trying to figure out how you were spending your Bitcoin. It's much easier. I think these capital gains tax should be eliminated. We've said it many times on our show. It's just a savings tax. Essentially, you're punishing taxpayers for saving money smartly, which is asinine to me. I think if you are smart enough to get into Bitcoin or any asset for that matter that you believe is going to appreciate in value over time, and it does so, you shouldn't be punished for making the correct decision. You should be able to use that money however you see fit. And if you were smart enough to make that decision in the first place, I think the government should be able to recognize that person's probably smart enough to allocate that capital themselves as compared to the government via the revenue they'll get from the taxation on the capital gains.
All right, I'm going to ask you, maybe this is a philosophical question, maybe it's a utilitarian kind of question, but I'm going to take for granted that you own some Bitcoin. I'm going to take that for granted in this conversation. Why do you own it?
Because I believe we need to fix the money. I think a lot of the problems that people are talking about today and through most of my life and the solutions to the problems they're talking about is swinging at branches. I think once you corrupt the money, which is the pricing mechanism of everything we do throughout the economy, it has this rippling effect of negative externalities on everything we touch, whether that's financial markets, healthcare systems, food systems, family formation. I think the core of all these problems, and many people think this is crazy, but I think the core of this problem is that we've corrupted the money. And that corruption of the most important tool that we use as humans, money is 1/2 of every transaction that we interact with, is the core of all these overarching problems that people are complaining about. And people can feel it too. The amount of economic stress, the amount of family stress, the amount of deaths of despair and addiction that exists today. I think this all stems from the rot of the money. And so why do I hold Bitcoin? Because I think Bitcoin is how we fix the money. And it's going to take the decisions of millions, tens of millions, 100 millions, billions of individuals around the world to fix that problem by adopting Bitcoin. So I hold Bitcoin to be a positive force in the direction of fixing the money.
There are, however, a lot of people who own Bitcoin because they think it'll go up in value. That's it. They have no ideological commitment to it. They have no vision of the world that corresponds with increased use of Bitcoin. Does that bother you?
No, weaponized greed is good. Everything's good for Bitcoin. As more people buy it as some sort of speculative asset that they think is just simply going to go up in value because others are going to pile into it. That's okay with me. It increases the market cap, which increases the liquidity profile, which increases the ability for people to send Bitcoin with less slippage over time. And so number go up is a very powerful technology. It's a NGU technology, is very potent, and it pulls in people from all walks of life, those like me who think money is the core of the problem, and speculators who simply want to add to their fiat stack at the end of the day. But everything's good for Bitcoin in that sense, where if you want to come speculate. It helps the market structure at the end of the day.
As we watch we all watch the price of Bitcoin in dollars because when I say we, I mean people who are interested in this. I have Bitcoin. I'd like it to be more valuable than less valuable, but I'm also curious, just as a historian of monetary systems about how this particular system is doing. And I'm curious to know what kind of thresholds do we think in the future, if Bitcoin reaches them, we'll see like another phase of its price jumping. Like is it just simply greater adoption by the public? Is it greater institutional recognition? Is it a breakthrough Bitcoin related technology? Like what what is going to be the next forerunner of the next big boom for it?
Well, I think round numbers are certainly strong from a psychological perspective. Like, there's been a meme going around, like if Bitcoin can go from $0 to $100,000, we're hovering under it right now, but we hit it, and I wouldn't be surprised if we get back to it at some point in the short to medium term. Like if we can get to 100,000 and get to 1 million, you sort of had that psychological FOMO. But I think that's psychological, but I think practical in terms of like implementation. I think one of Bitcoin's strongest properties is its ability to be pristine collateral in financial assets. So Bitcoin, it's divisible, it's saleable, the market trades 24/7, and you can liquidate it whenever. And I think what we're beginning to see, and what we're part of the theme that we're investing behind in 1031 right now, is this intersection of structured credit markets and Bitcoin. And so you can think of something like a commercial real estate loan getting refinanced, and part of the proceeds of the loan, you refinance, you pay off the existing mortgage. Maybe you take a couple $1 million to reinvest in the property to spruce it up, to make it better. And then you take a little bit of the loan proceeds, you put it in Bitcoin, and it sits within the credit structure of the 10-year loan. And that is superior, uncorrelated collateral in a credit structure that we think will perform very well over the 10-year period. But not only that, begin to introduce people to the idea that you should be collateralizing credit with Bitcoin because it's superior. If you look at a typical mortgage, whether it's residential mortgage or commercial real estate mortgage, you have this property that is the collateral typically, and it is exposed to the property of entropy, the universal property of entropy. Like it's a consumable good that's decaying, depending on where the market for real estate in that local community is at any given point in time. It could be easy or extremely hard to sell that property. You have closing costs and all of that stuff associated with it. However, if you were to collateralize something like property with Bitcoin predominantly, it's much easier to liquidate, to sell. There's a wider market, it's a global market to sell. And so I think from a practicality sense, we're going to begin to see Bitcoin as super collateral sort of introduced into the credit stack, which needs to be refinanced with better collateral more than ever before. And I think that, particularly for high finance types, is going to set off a light switch that says, oh, this is very obvious to me now. And we've seen it already played out with vanilla Bitcoin collateralized loans for dollars. You put up Bitcoin in a multi-sig address, you get dollars lent against that. And as long as you're able to pay the interest and the principal back, you get your Bitcoin back. But if you get into a situation where you can't pay your interest or your principal, or the price goes down and you get margin called, the ability for the lender, in that case, to liquidate that Bitcoin and get their principal back with a relatively small amount of risk is uniquely superior to anything that exists in the traditional financial market today. So from a psychological perspective, I think round numbers are good. If we can get to 100,000, we can get to 1 million. From a practical perspective, Bitcoin being used as a financial collateral tool is going to become more commonplace. And once that hits a critical tipping point, you have Bitcoin stuffed in all these different credit products with long durations. You're pulling a ton of supply off the market, which should have a positive effect on the price as well.
You know, every single book I've written or cause I have favored, I always, and I'm sure I'm not unique in this, I will come across the same 3 or 4 objections over and over again. And no matter how many times I answer them, you know, my answers apparently are not getting worldwide circulation, because I get the responses over and over. I get these same things over and over and over. So I want to raise one of them, just one of them with you. And the maybe the most common one, I mean, you know, there's of course, Bitcoin has no, quote, inherent value. Mm-hmm. I don't want to talk about that. But what about Bitcoin as a, quote, Ponzi scheme, and that the people who have it have a vested interest in getting more and more people into it, so that the early adopters, can get out, in a good position, but the later ones are going to be left holding the bag. I'm sure you've answered that over and over and over, but here's an opportunity to say it again.
I mean, so a Ponzi scheme, by definition, needs a central issuer, right? You need somebody running the Ponzi to actually get greater fools to put money in. Then typically in a Ponzi scheme, they take the money and hope to go find more greater fools. And at the end of the day, there's the jig is up. Bernie Madoff, markets crash. He has no more greater fools to pull from to pay out early investors, and that's just simply not how Bitcoin works. There's no like central issuer that's trying to steal money from people and then pay back earlier investors with later investors' money. And so, yeah, I think just like definitionally, it cannot be a Ponzi scheme because of the mechanics. Bitcoin is a distributed system with no central issuer. There's no man in the middle trying to con greater fools. And then like you can decide to adopt Bitcoin or not. And I think you're going to benefit from its adoption by others anyway. If you don't adopt Bitcoin, because it's bringing sound money back to the world, and the people that do adopt Bitcoin and have held it for long periods of time have found that it has greatly benefited their personal balance sheet and their ability to go deploy capital in the economy to build goods and services that benefit everybody. I think I'm an example of that. I've been using Bitcoin as a savings vehicle for over 10 years now, and it has really benefited my ability to build my family, build my business, build multiple businesses. And I have not depended on greater fools getting in. I think I would just try to reframe your understanding of Bitcoin if you have this idea that it's just one big Ponzi scheme, and think about what Bitcoin is competing with, which is the US dollar system and US federal debt issue. And that is quite literally a Ponzi scheme. There's too much debt, not enough dollars, and to service that debt, you have to continually debase the currency. And so while you're literally stuck in a Ponzi scheme, pointing at the solution to the Ponzi scheme and calling it a Ponzi scheme. That's how I would reframe it. You could decide to adopt Bitcoin or not. No sweat off my back. I think you should, but I'm not going to pressure you. I don't need you to adopt Bitcoin to make my life better. I think, just working from first principles, it is more obvious than ever that the world needs a neutral reserve asset for the digital age that cannot be controlled by central authorities. And Bitcoin objectively ticks those boxes. And I feel very comfortable storing my wealth in that for the long term because I know it can't be controlled. I know what it is. I know how it works. I do not feel as comfortable holding my long-term savings in dollars or treasuries, for that matter, because it is beholden to the whims of central operators who are dependent on greater fools getting into that system.
And finally, tell me about TFTC.
TFTC is a media company I started in 2017, stands for Truth for the Commoner. Started as a humble 15-person mailing list in 2017 when the price of Bitcoin was going up. Friends and family were texting, calling me, emailing me. And I said, hey, everybody, I'm going to start this newsletter. You can all read it. Instead of answering you individually, I'll teach you a little bit about Bitcoin every day. And so I've been writing that newsletter since 2017. It evolves. We've added a podcast, I have a website now. And so it's just a media company focused on Bitcoin, freedom, liberty in the digital age, having conversations similar to this with people interested in Bitcoin, people interested to topics tangential to Bitcoin. And really just it was a way for me to solve a problem I had, which was answering friends and family individually. And it's turned into a platform where I'm having conversations with really cool people about Bitcoin and still writing about what's happening in Bitcoin from a macro perspective and a technical perspective as well. What's happening with new tools and new upgrades to the protocol. And so if you're looking to stay up to date on Bitcoin from a tech perspective, from a macro perspective, check us out at TFTC.
So it's tftc.io?
Yes, that's the website.
Okay, tftc.io. So I'll put these things up on the show notes page, which would be tomwoods.com/2635, and also in the video description for those of you who are still trickling into the slow-growing YouTube version of this. Marty, I for 9 years, I did this show audio only, old school. Podcasts are supposed to be audio only. That was the stand I took And then I belatedly came on to YouTube. But the problem is, for 9 years, I had been posting audio-only files on YouTube, which they hate, especially because it doesn't get that much engagement. So then they concluded nobody likes listening to this guy. So it's like a struggle. Every other platform, like all the audio-only podcast platform, I do great. But YouTube is still sticking it to me after those 9 years of screwing with them. But anyway, we'll have in the video description information about 1031, also TFTC. But anyway, Marty, it's been great getting to know you, and we follow each other online, but I hadn't ever engaged with you before, and I'm glad we had this opportunity. So thank you very much.
Tom, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
And thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Make yourself and those you love less vulnerable to the regime, both mentally and physically. Get more forbidden information at tomsfreebooks.com and be sure to subscribe to the show wherever you listen. See you next time.
Like the sound of The Tom Woods Show? My audio production is provided by Podsworth Media. Check them out at podsworth.com.